into the election. Tell us your thoughts. Do you agree with me that the Liberals can win?
Well, look, I think that the Labor Party are getting really jittery and they're starting to show it in their behaviour. You've seen Bill Shorten get, losing his temper in press conferences. We've seen Penny Wong refuse to shake the hand of Simon Birmingham, her opposite colleague. And, that the lack of civility we're starting to see from the left is showing that this is an election that is going to be extremely close. And there's a real sense of entitlement on their side about, they thought they could just walk it in.
Yeah, James.
So I thought that moment with Penny Wong and Simon Birmingham was such a telling moment in this campaign that she refused to shake his hand.
Let's have a look at it.
Let's have a look at this, actually. Do we have that? Okay, we'll look at that a bit later, but
we could recreate it.
We could recreate it here. Yeah.
You'd be Simon.
Okay, I'm Simon Birmingham, and I've just said my bit about the Labor Party in China, and they don't. There seems to be mixed signals coming out of China.
No, you're Penny Wong,
and then when the show's finished, and so I go. Oh.
There was a lot of eye-rolling, head-shaking and refusal to accept the handshake. But let's see the real thing.
Let's compare our take.
Let's see how Rita did compared to the real thing.
Thanks to our 4 senators. Please put your hands together.
Now, this is supposed to be the person who would be the chief diplomat, essentially, under a Labour government, foreign affairs. What do you think about that? I mean, that's crazy, Amanda.
Well, look, it is one hell of a job interview, isn't it? If you can't demonstrate basic civility and diplomatic behaviour in your Australian parliamentary colleague in a debate with them, then, I'd be really concerned about your ability to debate difficult issues in a civil and constructive way with those we've got to deal with internationally.
Well, on that, we've had a number of people within Labor, the leadership team, saying absolutely ridiculous things about Donald Trump. Now, this is one of our closest allies, the leader of the free world. How is that relationship going to work out? Because Donald Trump doesn't take too kindly to others who smear him or who call him terrible names. And I just think about the recklessness of people within Labor doing that, knowing that, they're vying to be in government. How are relations between the US and Australia going to work?
Look, I imagine there'd be strain associated with that. I mean, they've been relentlessly feeding those hard-left trolls here at home who, badly want to be as divided and hating as those in the US. It's very hard to flip overnight and suddenly extend the hand of friendship and work constructively with the US going into the future. So, I mean, I think it would present some enormous problems you don't face if you deal with the coalition, because they haven't engaged in this nonsense.
Now, Amanda, I want to ask you, why is it that border protection has been kind of disappeared in this election campaign? We even have the ludicrous situation where we're not even sure who, if Labor do win power, will be in charge of the borders. Are they so scared of the issue that they won't even put up someone to debate it? And why have the coalition not been slamming those Labor politicians who clearly will open our borders from what they've said?
Look, I think it's one of those issues on which the coalition has kind of been victim of its own success. We have so effectively stopped the boats that many people in our community think that it is a problem that is permanently resolved. But the reality is that it is the strong approach of the coalition to offshore processing, turning back boats and temporary protection visas that makes that happen. There can be no weakening on any of those three elements if we want to make sure we don't have a return to the 50,000 people arriving on boats that we had under the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd era, or the 8,000 children in detention, or, even worse still, the 1,200 people who drowned at sea during the last Labor government. This is not a compassionate policy, and we have from Shane Newman, who's been their spokesperson on this stuff, although who knows who'll be running the show when it comes to border protection under a potential Shorten government. And in an interview that went for less than 2.5 minutes, he was asked a simple question, no less than 6 times, the same question, about what would Labor do about people who call themselves economic refugees. And, of course, that really just means economic migrants. People call them economic refugees to try and give them a status that's equivalent to people who are fleeing persecution. And he couldn't give a straight answer. It sounded as though the door was open under Labor for temporary protection visas to not just be gone in relation to those fleeing persecution, but also those who want to come to Australia for a better economic situation. This shows to you the enormous risk that comes from Labor when it comes to our borders. They cannot be trusted on this. They were hopeless on it last time, and everything Newman said on the subject shows us they have not learned the lessons of the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd time.
Rita?
So how can Labor effectively run that fantastic campaign, fantastic in that it was effective, the Mediscare campaign, based on nothing? There was no scare there. But you've got a real scare campaign here, because we've seen them dismantle policies that work in the past, and you just detailed what happened afterwards. Why hasn't the Coalition been able to prosecute this case that this is what will happen under Labor? And yes, border protection is no longer a main issue because the boats have stopped, but it will become one again. What has failed within the Coalition machine that message isn't being communicated?
Look, I don't think it has failed. I see it being delivered locally in a grassroots, on the ground kind of way, rather than in a big picture media-based kind of way. So it is a message that we're still putting out there, but the truth is there are many people in our electorate who think it's a problem that's been solved once and for all, and we've got to make sure they understand this is a can of worms easily reopened.
Now, Amanda, I want to ask you briefly about Get Up and these phony Liberals that are out there pretending to be Liberals, hoping to win votes. Zali Steggles, Oliver Yates, other people like this. I actually received a phone call, because I used to live in Warringah, from someone from Get Up in Victoria, who then went on to tell me at great length that that I should be looking at young Liberals instead of Tony Abbott. And I said, so are you saying that Zali Steggles is a young Liberal? And this girl kind of quickly backtracked and said, well, she's young. Well, oh, she's not that young. Oh, but yes, she's Liberal. Well, she's not really Liberal. So the Get Up are trying to sell this idea of these moderate Liberals out there who are in fact anything but Oliver Yates, Julia Banks and so on. What's your take on that?
Look, I think they are trying to pretend that these people are Liberals because they know that the values of the Liberal and National parties at their best are trusted and respected by Australians. And so the more they can do to try and make their candidates sound like they might reflect the values of the Liberal Nationals when they're, doing their thing, is going to work in their favour. It's extremely dishonest, and we all know that Zali Steggles never voted Liberal in her life. I've never heard of her being a young Liberal, in the sense of being a card-carrying young Liberal. And with people like Oliver Yates, we've seen him railing against people who lean even slightly to the right, having the right to be heard in the press. They want to shut down anybody who isn't part of the left-wing intelligentsia.
I mean, we saw this bizarre tweet from Oliver Yates saying that he would seek to have the Murdoch press licence revoked. Now, we haven't had press licences in this country for centuries, I don't think. I mean, this is just absolutely unhinged.
Oh, it is. I mean, this guy was in the Liberal Party, and I wonder about, why characters like this were allowed to hold positions of influence within the Liberal Party. Because you look at his tweets now and the positions he takes, he's left of Labor on a great many issues.
It does show you that when people become populist independents, they always lurch left, because that's where they get more adoration, that's where they get more help from these groups like Get Up. And so there's a real incentive for them to lurch left in the same way that Julia Banks has, same way that Zali Steggles does. But you look at what they believe in. They'd like to have restrictions on freedom of the press, restrictions on freedom of speech, restrictions on freedom of association and religion. These are deeply illiberal people, and they need to be exposed for that.